So, I did talk about Marianne Williamson before, but I'm going to do it again because it's my channel, and um, she officially announced, so it's no longer a float thing. A couple of days ago, she said she's running. To her credit, she goes on shows. She goes on some shows um, that are hosted by people that don't like her. So, to her credit, she's confronting people and she's out there. However, let's get something straight. If you don't learn anything else from this video, she's running because these channels on BreadTube, the lefty progressive, they're not really lefty, but the what's called progressive channels. In other words, the libs that are still integrated into the Democratic Party, of which I've given a lot of examples in my past videos. But you know that whole gamut from Cenk Uygur on the Young Turks, Rational National, Kulinski, Crystal Ball, all of these people, they need something to talk about. As a matter of fact, this is good news for Jimmy Dore, too, because he can talk about this, too, in a negative way. And it's good news for RBN, and it's good news for all these people who claim they don't like her. It's good for everybody's business model. It's good for the BreadTube business model. She's running for that and for Jacobin magazine types. Basically, if you don't know, Jacobin magazine is a magazine founded by Bernie supporters. They have some socialist. It's a fake socialist rag. It's not socialist. It's not socialist. There are certain people who I may not agree with on certain things, but I regard them as socialists, right? Like Marxist Leninists. There's that wonderful Trotskyite website. What is it called? The World Worker, whatever the hell. I don't read it that often, but that is where you want to read stuff. Jacobin magazine is only interesting on a historical basis, like when they run historical stories or historical articles. But to get back to my main topic here, Marianne Williamson is running so that Jacobin magazine and so that Kyle Kulinski, they have something to talk about that's on brand. Because they can't have a primary season with nothing to talk about other than supporting Biden. Because Biden and Harris have the appeal of a wastebasket fire. You can't do anything with them. On the other hand, you look at somebody like Marianne Williamson, and the first thing you think of is she's just kooky. Now, I know some people are going to say that's an odd criticism, but that's just the beginning of her problems. It's not just that she's well-to-do, part of the she's a rich person that's worked for Oprah. She has been somebody who's worked for rich people, around rich people. All her friends are rich people. But also, instead of her coming into the party to move others to the left, what we've seen is that she's vulnerable herself to be pushed to the right. You think she's going to say anything about the war in Ukraine? Do you think she's going to say anything about the fact that inflation is a scam? That it's really partially it's not just profiteering by corporations, it's also the fact that we're at war with Russia that's actually driving up certain prices? You think she's going to give a damn about what most consumers are going through? Because a lot of people are paying at the pump and at the supermarket checkout counter for liberals feeling good about countering Putin, even though that war is not going anywhere, and it's just a big, what's the money pit, or you know, hornswoggle. I don't know what term you want to use, but that's what it is. It's a bottomless hole of crap. And you think she's going to run and do something about these issues or somehow drive Biden into any position he doesn't want to go? Uh, and I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd that you're going to continue. First of all, Bernie Sanders in 2020 wasn't even Bernie Sanders from 2016. He didn't even have that much momentum. And you're going to try to pick up the gauntlet, try to pick up the torch from him with a candidate with even less enthusiasm and name recognition. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. I mean, I I know I got angry and I said some of this stuff in the last video, but I mean, I think it bears reiteration. She's running to make money for Kulinski, and people who are single moms are going to donate to her. People who are on the border of maybe not being able to make their rent money are going to donate to her. It's sick. The whole thing is sick, and it ought to be called out for what it is. I mean, I don't really know what to say to people, and I think it's absurd. I think it's absurd because here we are at a precipice, possibly, who knows, possibly a wider world war with Russia. We're about to really lose our position in the world to China, which I don't really mind per se. That's another issue. But there are a lot of things going on, and we're still suffering from about 2,000 to 3,000 people dying a week. About 3,000 people dying a week from COVID. People don't have access to health care. There's still a fascist organization called ICE going around arresting people who are really law-abiding individuals, and there's still this tremendous inability to get into the country for people who are suffering from the aftermath of our foreign policy in Latin America. There is a tremendous inability to find affordable housing. I could go on. There's a fertility crisis. People aren't having kids. Not just, I mean, first of all, they're not having kids because they can't afford it, but men are becoming sterile because of all the microplastics. We've got climate change. I mean, there are some real issues. And the decision here on the part of Progs is to run someone who's a wedding officiant and a psychic. Like, what planet is Kulinski on? What planet is he on? I mean, mostly I blame him and I blame Crystal Ball, but I mean, I'm sure there are others. I don't subscribe to most of these channels anymore. I just kind of see them. I kind of see some articles that Sirota publishes. I think some of his articles are worth reading. I see some of the stuff by Dave Dayan. But they are just out to lunch. They're out to lunch. They're all thinking about the regulatory state and passing a few rules in committee, and if they're going to get the right committee assignments. And we're like in crisis mode. And everyone is going through the motions. Now I know people are like, some people are like, oh, this is great. Some of my friends tell me, the country's not that bad a shape. Could be worse. It was worse in Russia. Some of these immigrants tell me, and all this. We're averaging a chemical spill once every 2 days. Okay? There are hundreds of zip codes in the United States with unacceptable levels of lead. Many, many communities, especially black communities, don't have access to drinking water. There is a decided educational and IQ deficiency among the poor. And no, that's not caused by them being the wrong race. It's caused by them being poor. And all of these things are going on, and they result. I mean, I am actually kind of shocked that the situation isn't worse in terms of crime levels, but that's obviously what's driving crime, even though it's not really going up. So I'm shocked. It should be higher than it is. And then, as a percentage, in order to balance things out, as a percentage of the world's prisoners, we have the biggest share. We have more prisoners in jail, not per capita. I mean, total, we have more than any other country. And per capita, of course, we're number one. I mean, it's crazy. And now, why is that? Because we have to do that to sustain the ridiculousness. Because if these people were free and on the streets, what do you think would happen to the political order? If all these people were on the streets and could vote and were invested in voting or invested in organizing, more importantly, organizing than voting, you would have a different politic in the United States. And I think, I mean, honestly, right now I'm at 10. I'm going to go to about 15 minutes. But I think, honestly, that's why we live in this position that we're in, where you could have a huge BLM protest that's the biggest thing seen civil rights wise since the 1960s. And yet, the police weren't defunded. The police are actually getting more money. And it's a bipartisan effort. Now, why is that? They know that things are going to get worse. And they don't want to cut funding when things are going to get worse. Because even though a lot of politicians are feeling vulnerable, the same as if you were a Roman emperor, you'd feel vulnerable to the Praetorian Guard. If you know anything about Roman history, at times the Praetorian Guard, which was supposed to be the Imperial Guard, would actually auction off the throne. And it's a little bit different here today, but the principle still applies. Politicians often need the police. They need the police to enforce the rules, to enforce the property rules. And things are going to get hairy, and people on top don't feel like cutting funding. They don't feel like doing any of that. It doesn't matter if black males, young black males, are being disproportionately targeted. That's not relevant to them. Who cares? So that's why a lot of these things are happening. The civil rights violations, in part, reflect the reality of the coming, I'd say, I don't know. I mean, we're already in a sort of dystopia light, aren't we? If not dystopia mid-level. But that's you have to have the police. And you have to have prisons, and you have to have the court systems that we have to keep a lid on the situation, because it's intolerable for a lot of people. That's just reality. So, and in all of that, the great genius idea of the liberals, the liberal wing of the Democratic Party, who can never seem to give up on this idea that the rest of the Democratic Party is going to vote for them. Their big idea here is to run Marianne Williamson. And she had the very fact that she had to give a speech or something in which she talked about how she's not the magic crystal lady, I think is so demonstrative of the situation we find ourselves in. Like, this is not a serious thing. This isn't serious. This is done because liberals don't have anything else to do. All they can do is try to primary in a hopeless fashion, try to get eyeballs and clicks on their web pages and their YouTube channels, while they sell you nonsense about how you can vote in blank. Certainly, some people actually think in this world, this is frightening, but some people actually think you could vote in socialism. But, even if it's not socialism per se, even if it's some kind of social democracy, at this point, let me put it to you this way. Why did we have after the New Deal? I mean, we know why we had a New Deal: to save capitalism. I hope you guys know that. I may talk about it in another video, but why did we have, after the New Deal, we had a civil rights movement, right? War on poverty, the Great Society. Why did that happen? It happened because we were competing with the Soviet Union. It happened because there was an alternative model available called socialism. There is no alternative model today. Elites are not afraid that you're going to run off and join, the Communist Party or become an anarcho-syndicalist like me or whatever. They're not worried about that. So without that competing model, where do you have to go? You got nowhere to go. So they're not afraid. The reason that they instituted the Great Society and passed the 64 Civil Rights Act was because it was a bad look to have black people being hit with water cannons in the middle of the street, having dogs barking at them and having being hit by water cannons by racist police officers. That was a bad look for the freedom-loving US trying to win a propaganda war against the Soviet Union. Where is that today? There is no there's no split among elites. There's an elite consensus, and the elite consensus is you better get down. That's what the elite consensus is. You better stop complaining because you have it pretty good, son. That's the message they're sending. They're not doing anything about the federal minimum wage. They're basically splitting the union into blue states and red states, so it's sort of like developing world versus third world. With first world being if you're in the right zip code, meaning, those precious few zip codes in New York, Florida, and Southern California, and Palo Alto, California, and everyone else can go screw themselves. And Marianne Williamson's not going to do anything about that. She's not going to do anything about that. She's just going to accept the reality, and she's going to be happy to accept the reality. She's going to be limited in what she says. She's going to disappoint every step of the way. And at the end, she's not going to win a single primary. She's not going to win a single delegate. And even if she did win a primary, she would be marginalized with the superdelegates. And she's going to be told what to do and what to say. And that's it. Game over. If you're investing in that, if you're Kyle Kulinski and you're telling poor people to invest in that, that is a sin. There's no other way of putting it. That's a sin. Anyway, end of rant. Talk to you later.